Welcome, everybody, to Rock Talk with the DocRocker. I'm Jeff Bonomo, joined again, like I am every week, with the DocRocker, Danton Arlotto. Look out! What are we talking about today?
Look out! We're talking about Ronnie James Dio, the greatest metal singer who ever lived. And we've definitely said that before on previous episodes, and we will say it again on future episodes, because he really is the greatest. He's my personal favorite. We're going to talk a lot today about his specific work with the band Black Sabbath. You know, those of you that don't know, he was brought in 1979 as a replacement for Ozzy as the frontman for Sabbath, and arguably that was some of their best time as a band. You know, they definitely have a tremendous output. 4 albums, 3 studio albums, if you want to count just the ones that have original tracks. They did a live album as well. So Jeff and I are going to kind of take you guys play by play through those albums, talk about some highlights, talk about their sound and what became of them afterwards.
Yeah, Dio joined in 1979, but one thing that I found was really interesting about him joining, he was actually suggested to the band by none other than Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's wife. Well, it wasn't Ozzy's wife at the time. She was working for her father, Don Arden, who managed Black Sabbath at the time, and she said, "You should hire Ronnie James Dio." That's how he got involved, which was kind of weird if you think about
that. I didn't know. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I read about that today when I was doing a little bit of research. So Dio joined in 1979, and before we, really dig into like the albums and stuff, I want to say I didn't know Dio was in Black Sabbath for a while until maybe I was like 12 or 13 years old. I had no idea. My first brush with, I knew who Dio was. I knew that he had his own solo thing, the whole Rainbow in the Dark, Holy Diver thing going on. Mm-hmm. I didn't know he was in Black Sabbath until I was probably almost a teenager. And what happened was I went to the Laurel Mall back when we used to go pick up music on cassette tape. And I was very into Black Sabbath at the time, and I had most of their albums. And then I saw this one album I didn't have before called Live Evil. I was like, oh man, I didn't know Sabbath put out a live album. So I looked on the cassette and I'm like, oh, I know these songs, and some of these songs I don't know. So I picked it up, went home, and I'm like, who the hell is singing? What is this?
What is this magic? What is this madness?
It was pretty much madness. I didn't like it at first. I didn't like it at first because the song sounded so different. And then
stylistically, it's a big departure from when Ozzy was the front man.
Oh yeah, I was just listening to it the other day to prepare for this, and I'm like, I really, really like it now, especially now. It did grow on me, but yeah, I had no idea he was in Sabbath until then.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine that being a kind of off first impression if you're going there expecting like all the stuff like from their earlier days with Ozzy. Because nothing wrong with that. Ozzy is just as fantastic as Dio. I love both singers equally, but well, no, that's not true. I like Dio better, but I will admit that Ozzy is just as good. But yeah, I could totally see that. I could see that. It was for me. It was kind of like getting Iron Maiden's Killers for the first time after hearing all their like greatest hit stuff with Bruce Dickinson, and like, who's this singer? Well, what is this? And then, sure enough, quickly learning to really love it and loving it more and more later and later and later on.
So, what was the first brush with Dio that you had?
Well, for me, just like you, it was the solo stuff, mm-hmm. And I took the route that I actually don't recommend to anyone now, is I just picked up like a greatest hits thing. There was a 10-track Dio metal hits album that was out on CD when I was about 14, 15, when I first got into, I was like really exploring all kinds of like rock and metal right around the time I got into Maiden. Really, I was like, well, let me check out all this other stuff. So, and I heard the name Dio, and I just kind of like, all right, well, let me eventually check them out. So I just bought that album, and, I'm glad I did. Of course, every song on there is amazing. And then that led me to kind of, well, let me eventually I would go to get all of his solo albums and, love all of them to pieces. But as far as hearing him in Sabbath, it was kind of when I was going through all like the exploring Dio solo stuff, I kind of stumbled upon the Black Sabbath Dio years compilation that came out around that time, like 2007, 2008, when I was really getting into all that stuff. So, and it's funny, to prepare for today, I was looking at, all like the main albums of, let me let me see what he did with Heaven and Hell, and let me see what he did with the Mob Rules. And, I've listened to Dehumanizer a number of times, and I really like that one. That one's probably my favorite. And it was funny because, like, almost every song on those first two albums is on the compilation. So really the compilation, yeah. I don't want to say it's all you need, but it definitely sets the bar as far as, a lot of times greatest hits things are not that great. And you kind of, if you do just that, you're just on the surface and scratching the surface. You're not really getting the full course of like what that ensemble can do.
I'm going to say it's not all you need. I think you should listen to all the albums. Definitely. But yeah, to really get a taste of it, because it is a different band. Heaven and Hell was released April 1980. And to me, it really signifies a departure of their style, because Ronnie James Dio is in the band and he influenced the writing a lot. You could
tremendously.
Even the way Tony Iommi plays, I think is totally different than what he was doing with Sabbath just a few albums before. And Tony Iommi, I don't know if you haven't read his memoirs yet, you should. He goes into pretty big detail about the Dio years in his book. Not as much detail as he does with the Ozzy years, of course, but he does talk about Dio a lot. And one of the things he says that, the process of recording and writing with Ozzy was completely different than with Dio. Like Ozzy, for instance, Ozzy's a singer and Dio's a musician. We could agree on that because Dio can play instruments. I really don't think Ozzy can play an instrument. I'm pretty sure he can't. So we're just going to label him a singer because that's what he is.
For sake of argument, sure.
Right. And Dio's a musician. So I'm sure Dio is speaking the language better, to the other musicians than Ozzy would have. Ozzy could hum stuff,
but Dio could really communicate what he wanted.
Right. What Iommi would say was Ozzy would like just kind of sing. He would sing the melody. He would sing the riff, basically, and he could see that. And like say, like a song like Iron Man, he's just singing along with the riff. Where Dio, since he's such a great musician, he's able to like understand and take it different places,
create the different layers of sound. Yeah. Of like having the bass and guitars link in and do a separate riff while he creates a melody on top. That's a different layer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I'm not saying the way Ozzy does it is bad. Ozzy's great. I love Ozzy. He's a legend. But with Dio, they got another musician in the band. And there's actually a record. Tony Iommi claims he has a recording featuring Ozzy singing a very early version of Children of the Sea. Totally different melody and stuff. That probably will never get released, but that's really interesting stuff. That like some of this stuff was written for Heaven and Hell when Ozzy was still around, kind of probably at the end. But Heaven and Hell, I think, is a fantastic album from beginning to end. It really is such a solid album.
It's a knockout.
Yeah, and the only thing I don't like about it is this was the Black Sabbath drummer Bill Ward's last album with Sabbath, and his drumming is way different on that album. It's really basic compared to what he used to do. I'm not sure why. Having a lot of substance abuse problems at that time, a lot of personal problems, and he kind of just dropped out. I think midway through the tour, if I whatever I read was correct. But Bill Ward's drumming is way more basic on this, and I think it's a nitpick about that because I'm such a Bill Ward fan, especially like his older stuff, like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and like Volume 4, all the old Sabbath albums. Man, Bill really shines. On this one, he just kind of lays back and just maybe he was just like, I don't really like how this sounds because it doesn't sound anything like the other Sabbath albums. So who knows?
It definitely makes you wonder how much of it is like a vibe thing, how much of it is, maybe he kind of had like a sense of being overwhelmed by the presence of like another musician kind of giving a higher level of creative input, and think, maybe I'm just going to kind of take the backseat, let Dio and the string guys do their stuff, and I'm just going to find a way to just keep it in the pocket and focus on playing simpler grooves.
I mean, I've listened to and read a lot of interviews with Bill Ward, and he always says like him and Ozzy were buddies. Him and Ozzy were like this, and maybe it was just because his buddy was gone, Who
Yeah,
knows?
maybe a piece of them was missing from the
Yeah,
equation.
yeah,
So
who knows? But
number of different theories, I'm sure.
yeah, getting back to Heaven and Hell, man, just the title track alone, man, that just listen to that. That's Dio era Sabbath. It's just perfect.
It's the perfect embodiment of it. Yeah, I would agree
And
100%.
the album cover, it just is perfect too. The Smoking Angels. I love it. You look at it, it's like Heaven and Hell, angels smoking cigarettes, perfect. From beginning to end, it's a fantastic album. Since we've been doing this, I've gone back more often to Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and they're great albums. And again, they just stylistically are so different from like Black Sabbath Paranoid or Black Sabbath Master of Reality. It's almost like a different band. And it was brought up kind of on our Facebook group today when I asked a question about it. What do you think about the Dio era Black Sabbath? Someone mentioned the David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar comparison with Van Halen. It's like two different bands.
Yeah, you could easily make the same comparison to Sabbath. I would agree with that totally.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think one's better than the other, though. Really,
No, yeah, both are excellent. It's just completely different. It's like you go to like a fancy restaurant and like here's like your steak dish and then here's like your salmon dish. They're both like high class, high quality, excellent food, but it's a matter of taste. Which do you like better? I go for steak, so I go for Dio. Something a little meatier than
steak.
Yeah, okay. Dio's the steak for me. There's my analogy. There's in my infinite wisdom. There's what you have.
So next up is the Mob Rules. 1 year later, November 1981, the 10th studio album by Black Sabbath. Second album with Dio, and it's the first to feature drummer Vinny Appice. And before the album came out, there's a recording of Mob Rules for the soundtrack of the animated film Heavy Metal that's a little bit different. If you hear that version and listen to the album version, it's slightly different. So that's a kind of little cool thing. I've known that for years. I had to rechecked it out today, but yeah, it's a little bit different. Now here's something really neat about Mob Rules: the album cover. Some fans claim the name Ozzy is spelled out on the album cover down at the bottom in blood. Some also think that like by it says kill Ozzy down like in this bloody kind of gore down.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, you have to check it out. I definitely could see the word Ozzy. I don't know if I could see the word kill, but it looks like it's like blood splatter on the ground. Now Tony Iommi in his biography was like, nah, that's a bunch of bull, but what was he gonna say? Yeah, we put it on there.
Yeah, he could easily just be brushing it under the carpet. Who knows?
So what do you think about the Mob Rules?
Like I said before, a whole bunch of like the top songs on that record are featured in the compilation album. So it was weird for me, like, again, to compare it to Iron Maiden, like my first exposure was just hearing like a greatest hits compilation, with our cousin EJ. Shout out to EJ for getting me turned on to Maiden. But yeah, but like that whole was just the tip of the iceberg. And like with finding each successive album by Maiden, there's like, all right, I recognize like 2 or 3 of those songs from their greatest hits. And then there's a whole album's worth of stuff that I would hear for the first time. And going into Sabbath, after hearing the Dio years, going through Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, it's like I already know more than half this music. I've listened to the Dio years album cover to cover so many hundreds of times in high school and college, and I keep going back to it because it's just so. It's not to gush too much, but like Sabbath with Dio for me is literally like the epitome of what heavy metal is as a genre, I think, at least as far as what I, at least let me rephrase that, what I like about heavy metal, of having these like real tight heavy riffs that are unison between the guitar and the bass, having solid drum grooves that are slow and sludgy and heavy. And so many times Sabbath is compared to Doom, and how Sabbath was like this sort of impetus for doom metal to start. You could see it with Dio, and you can see it with Ozzy too, for how many, but yeah, just like real heavy stuff that really puts on your stink face. And then having Dio's beautiful operatic voice just soaring on top, and his lyric content, his subject matter, and all that sort of stuff. And you know me, I'm not really big on lyrics, but so many of his lines come through and just catch my ear every time, and just the way he delivers it in the recordings. I never had the pleasure of seeing him live, but I'm sure he was even better than he was on the records. But yeah, it was weird going through those two albums because I did it really recently. Like in the last couple of months, I was like, let me actually dig in and check out. So like Heaven and Hell, I already knew almost every track. Mob Rules, same thing. So it was one of those, it was nice. There was a little treat for me of like, oh, here's like 2 or 3 other songs that I never heard before, but are just as good. So it was just a nice little kind of like a bonus content sort of thing.
Sign of the Southern Cross is on that album, which is my favorite Dio era song by far. Which is saying a lot because I think they're all great, especially I'm looking through the track listing of Mob Rules right now. It's the same as Heaven and Hell. There's not a bad song on it. Okay, so that E5150 song, that kind of instrumental weird thing that happens before the Mob Rules, is it really a song? Whatever. It's 3 minutes of kind of weird noises and stuff. But other than that, you're gonna start off with Turn Up the Night, just it's a killer opener, and it ends with Fall Off the Edge of the World, which is another fantastic song. Going to our Rock Talk group, people are mentioning from these albums that were just the first two, like Country Girl is another one that a lot of people love. Southern Cross again, Voodoo, they're all excellent songs. I can't, I'm looking through the track listing now. I can't see a weak one other than that instrumental weird kind of experimental thing they do for about 3 minutes before the Mob Rules. Whatever, it's kind of part of the Mob Rules. Like it's like the
it's basically an introduction. Yeah. I would agree.
But I think at that point, everyone is like at their absolute peak of their game on that album. Like it is just, it's just as good as Heaven and Hell, I think. I may have ranked
putting those two back to back, they're easily like the pantheon.
When I ranked the Black Sabbath albums the one week, I think I put Heaven and Hell a little bit higher than Mob Rules, but you could switch them back and forth, really.
Yeah, they're basically interchangeable, I would say. My personal favorite is Dehumanizer, because that was the first one I went in and checked out like years and years ago, and I've re-listened to it a couple times since. I listened to it this week to get ready for this because somebody mentioned it in the comments. Who was
Allie.
it? Yeah. And as soon as I saw her post, I was like, oh man, I haven't listened to that in a while. Let me go back. That one was more of like the Maiden experience for me, where like I recognized the small handful of tracks from the compilation, but there was a lot more on that I didn't know. And the first time I heard it, I remember it just blew me away. And I listened to it again today after, a good several weeks or months since I've listened to it last, and like a whole like Time Machine, stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, this stuff is awesome.
Now, Time Machine's interesting too because there's another version of Time Machine, and if you listen to the newest like remaster, whatever it was, like 2008. They include both versions. I'm not sure if the both versions were included in the original album now. I'd have to look. But originally that song was written for the Wayne's World soundtrack. And if you listen to it, it's different. It's fixed different, played a little different. Dio sings a little bit differently in it. The Wayne... Hi. Hello. We're talking Dio.
Nice. Hi.
Oh, have fun. Play some Dio while you're down there.
There you go.
Perfect doing laundry music.
Dio's perfect for doing anything, especially like, horrible adult things like laundry.
Yeah. Taxes, laundry, cooking.
Anything, really.
Dusting.
Dusting?
Satanic worship. Whatever.
Oh, no, Dio doesn't worship the devil.
I know. It's just so funny.
Like to see that.
So many outsiders that look in on the whole metal scene is like, oh, God, they have all this angels and demons stuff. They must worship the devil.
Well, you know what? A little sidebar on that. When I was younger, the Dio logo, if you held up his logo from the solo album, if you held it up in the mirror, it said devil on it. Backwards. Did
it really?
Yeah. You can see that.
Oh, I never knew that.
Because Dio means God. So we flip it around. The way it was written, it says devil.
Oh, that's so genius. I love that.
Let me tell you, if you were in Catholic school in the 80s, they would have beat your butt for that. Those nuns were crazy. All right, so back to Time Machine. Time Machine is a different version on the Wayne's World soundtrack. It's also on the remastered version. The Humanizer came out 1992 after like a 9-year break that Dio and Vinny weren't in the band. Oh God, no, more than that. It was like a 10-year break or something. But anyway,
yeah. Well, when did the live album come out? Wasn't that 84?
the live album was 82. Yeah, that's right. We skipped over Live Evil.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about it in the beginning. Live Evil was my first introduction. I still like that album for what it is. I could listen to it a lot.
Like a 10-year break then.
Yeah. I listen to it a lot more now than I used to. I put that away for a while, but I really enjoy it. As far as the Humanizer, man, when that came out, I was stoked. And I listened to it today, just like you did. I wanted to re-listen to it again, especially after Allie said, like, she was mentioning some songs like Letters from Earth. I listened to it all today, and it's so good.
There's not a dud on there.
Good. A Computer God, Master of Insanity, Time Machine, TV Crimes. There's a lot to love on that.
Yeah.
Only thing I don't like,
Computer God's a fantastic opener.
I do not like the drum sound on that at all. Oh God, it hurts. It hurts so bad. Now, the alternate version of Time Machine that's on the Wayne's World soundtrack, the drums sound better on that, a little bit. But man, they sound like Vinny Appice's just going to town on cardboard boxes. I don't know why they want it to sound like that. It's real dead, and I don't know. And he's a good drummer. I don't mind what he's playing. It's just, now it's not like
the way that it's handled and mixed, whatever sort of setup he's working with.
I just don't like.
I can see that. I don't mind it. I mean, I'm not a drummer, but I pay attention to the drums on occasion. But it didn't really catch my ear as something I didn't like.
I'm better with it now than I was when it came out. I'll say that, because the songs are still so strong. There's, just appreciating the songs. I could put it away. It's not like it's the what's that Metallica album with the really bad drum sound? Saint Anger. It's not that bad. It's just, it doesn't add to it. But man, like I said, the songs are so strong. It's fantastic. Now, that also was like the last time Dio recorded with Black Sabbath, before the Dio Years compilation, where they went back. They actually wrote 3 new songs on the Dio compilation, which got them into the band they formed with Dio before he died. But Dio's contract ended with Black Sabbath in November of 1992. Now, according to Tony Iommi, Dio quit right after the contract was done. Like, they were supposed to play like 2 shows or something, but Dio quit because he was asked to open up for Ozzy Osbourne on Ozzy's final show. And Dio called Ozzy a clown. And he's, Black Sabbath is not opening for Ozzy. So Dio wouldn't sing. So the band,
I did not know that. I didn't know anything about Ozzy.
Yeah, it was Dio being Dio, I guess. He was like, why should Black Sabbath open for Ozzy? So Dio quit. And the band, like, apparently he quit like right before the show, because the band replaced Dio like for these 2 shows with Judas Priest frontman Rob Halford. There's actually recordings of it too, real bad recordings on YouTube. And Halford actually sang with Sabbath a few times. When Ozzy got sick, Halford stepped in and sang for Sabbath, because your brother Adam was pissed off that he went to see Black Sabbath and Rob Halford was singing for them.
Oh, I didn't know he saw Sabbath.
Well, he did, and you ask him about it. He's very adamant about it not being Sabbath, because Rob Halford was singing, Ozzy was sick. But yeah, going back to 1992, that's what happened. Dio was like, no way, I'm out. And then Halford's like, I'll do it. So that's what happened.
I would love to hear them with Rob Halford. He's one of my favorite singers too.
Well, look him up. Look it up on YouTube. There's a few videos. Some of them are better than others as far as quality goes, because you're going all the way back to 1992. But like, again, there is another video online of Halford singing Sabbath. I think it was a reunion tour, whenever that was, 2002, 2003 or something. Ozzy was sick, couldn't do it, so Halford stepped in again. And it's interesting, I'll say that. And he was asked, he thought, like, after that was over, like, Halford is still kind of toying around with this. I think Blabbermouth had an article about it not too long ago. Halford's like, I'll do something with the guys from Sabbath. Like he's
He's
not
like all
against
for
it.
it. Yeah, a good
Yeah,
sport team
I
player.
think it'd be kind of neat.
Nice.
I think it'd be pretty neat.
Yeah,
See,
it could be incredible.
Geezer, Iommi, and Rob Halford. We could probably write something pretty neat.
Yeah, I would love to hear that.
So moving on from Dehumanizer, the next thing would be the Dio's Year compilation they did in 2007. Now, like I said, 3 new songs on there. The Devil Cried, I think, is the best song on that compilation. Out of the 3 new ones, Ear in the Walls.
Yeah, out of the new ones, easy. Yeah. So
bad. The Devil Cried. Yeah, that's a great song.
Yep.
Shadow of the Wind, I didn't really care for. It's all right. Ear in the Wall again, it's all right.
Yeah.
But the Devil Cried, I think.
Much as I love the slow doomy stuff, Shadow of the Wind just kind of, it's like a slug. It just, it puts me to sleep.
Yeah.
Ear in the Wall, it's one of those, like, it's 50-50 for me. Like, sometimes I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah, this song is like way better than I give it credit for. Then other times I'm like, pass. Let me just loop The Devil Cried like 5 more times and just play it because it's so good. So
yeah, and I think that was like the impetus for recording more stuff. It was probably with that song, because that song stylistically I think feels like their last album they did, the Devil You Know album under the name Heaven and Hell, and that whole thing was like they're going to go out and support the Black Sabbath Dio years. And I didn't really research this too much, but it probably had something to do with Sharon Osbourne and the Osbourne camp saying like, we own the name Black Sabbath or something along those lines. So they were like, we'll just name our band Heaven and Hell.
Yeah, because isn't it all the same guys?
It's everybody. Yeah, it's everybody from the Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules era
lineup. Okay.
Yeah, and I saw them, and they were fantastic. They just played all Sabbath Dio stuff. There was no stuff from when Ozzy was in the band. It was all Mob Rules, Dehumanizer, and Heaven and Hell stuff. And it was.
And then they had some new stuff too. Then.
Right, but they didn't play that when I saw them. They weren't. That
album
really? Wasn't recorded. No, it was all classic stuff, man. It was all just classic stuff.
Oh, that's probably even better.
Oh, it was.
As far as the live show goes.
Yeah, that was down in Philly at the Spectrum. That was really crazy night that was. I was with a bunch of guys, and the weird thing was like a mutual friend of ours kind of put us together because this guy knew somebody down in Philly and this guy knew somebody down in Philly. Long story short, it was a bunch of people I kind of went to high school with, but we were all in different cliques. But now we're all in a car, 20 some years later, driving down to the Spectrum to see Dio because we all love Dio. It was one thing
one thing that glued everyone together.
Yeah, and we drank a lot that day.
Or a goth or a punk or whatever you are, you could. There's a place in everyone's heart for Dio.
We drank a lot that day, and one of the guys got us I believe it was the owner's box. We were up in one of those boxes, and we had it was catered. There were beers flying everywhere. There was a lot of food. There was a lot. It was a good time, and I got to sit there and see Dio. It was Dio, Megadeth. Well, Heaven and Hell, Megadeth, and there was another band that opened. I don't recall who it was, and I don't really care because Megadeth was great too. So Heaven and Hell started in 2006 to 2010. The Devil You Know album came out in 2009,
and then shortly enough after that, Dio unfortunately passed.
May 16th, 2010. Yeah, so not too long after that album came out, they canceled the tour support for the album. That album. Mm-hmm. I'll say this, man. That album is crushingly heavy. It's slow. It's doomy.
Yeah. It's disgusting, and I love it.
It's really good. It's really good. And if you want to watch our album review, that's what we're going to do this week is album review of Devil You Know, and of course another one. But that's going to be the other podcast we're recording tonight. So
we're going to tie all the Dio stuff together. Totally.
So we're not going to talk too much about the details about the Devil You Know, other than it's a great album, and it was a great last recording that Ronnie did.
Yeah, it's definitely a fitting swan song for his career as far as his partnership with Sabbath is concerned, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ronnie James Dio in 2009 was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and he died within a year, and going back to thinking about what Iommi said in his book and what you read online, you know, a lot of people said like Dio knew, and he just wanted to continue working, and you know,
Yeah, do as much as he can before he kicks the bucket.
Yeah, you know. And if you ever get a chance, again, go to YouTube and watch his memorial service. It is amazing. You know, the amount of love that pours out for this man from every corner of like the heavy metal world. Really, really cool. You know, and he's been dead for, you know, over 10 years now. And I remember when he died, it really hit me harder than I thought it was going to. You know, but
yeah, me too. Because that was like shortly after I really got into him and was like exploring all of his solo stuff. And I just picked up Sabbath the Dio years, and I had a chance to see him play in Reading. I don't know if it might have been part of the Heaven and Hell tour. I didn't know what it was, but you know, EJ told me about it, and we thought about going, but for whatever reason, we decided not to go, and we didn't go. And that, sure enough, that was my last opportunity to see him live, first and last, and I didn't take it, and I regret that. Every time I think about him, I'm like, God, I could have seen him right before he passed, and I didn't. And I'll never see him play live, and I never did, and I never will, and that breaks my heart because he's my favorite metal singer.
That's why after Corona is over,
go to every concert opportunity you could go to. If you have any doubts or second guesses, fuck all that. Go see the concert. Get those tickets. Man. Spend the money, or you will regret.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad I only got to see him once. But I'm glad I got to see him doing all the old Sabbath stuff, and he sounded great. You know, there's some videos online, I guess towards the end of that tour, where he's starting to sound a little shaky. But I got a feeling he was sick and he knew it, and he was
probably his health.
Yeah, he was probably just doing shows because that's what he's been doing. You know, like we're only really talking about Black Sabbath era Dio, but Ronnie James Dio.
Oh, there's so much more to his career than just that. Aside from his solo stuff, even.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, okay, let's just talk about Sabbath today because that's an entire podcast. Because you know, Dio was born in 1942, and he's been playing music since like the 1957, maybe somewhere around there. Like I think the first recorded thing he did was called he was part of Vegas Kings, renamed later Ronnie and the Ramblers, in 1957. And then 67 he formed Elf, and on and on and on and on. And we could just take his early career and talk about that. We could just take his career with Richie Blackmore's Rainbow and talk about that. We could take his career solo and talk about that. We could have, you know, a month's worth of podcasts. So he's had a huge career, and no one sings like him. No one can sing like him for whatever reason. The people in his solo band carried on. I think they do a tribute to Dio called Last in Line, I believe. You know, but the guy that had to have singing, he's a great singer. He's just not Dio, you know. They also did the Dio hologram for a little bit. Whatever. I'm not too big on that. But as far as his work with Sabbath, if you haven't listened to it, if you haven't given it a chance, because it's not Aussie Sabbath, like some people will say, you're doing a disservice, man.
Shed that bias and check it out, because it is great. It's just different, you know. It's definitely not Sabbath with Ozzy, but that doesn't make it any better or worse. It's an equally, like I said before, pantheon of heavy metal.
And like you said about heavy metal, like that's how heavy metal is supposed to sound. I totally agree with you. When you picture the traditional heavy metal, you should picture Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Dehumanizer type songs, type sound, you know, especially the Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. Picture that sound. The title tracks from each of them. That's heavy metal. That's traditional classic heavy metal right there.